crowds out 33 cents of private domestic capital. I'll let you do the math on this. Now, think about it. We're paying the government 4 to 5% for that dollar. In other words, that's what you're earning. However, if you had that same dollar and you're putting it in private equity, history here says that you're earning between 10 and 15% on private equity returns. So what we're doing, folks, if we over-borrow, we're in effect taking away from the future and our ability to continue to invest and grow our economy. So one of the things you don't want to do is end up over-borrowing. Well, that's point number one. Point number two, where are we borrowing? Where are we getting this money? Where's this $5 trillion coming from? Where's the money come from? Well, 24% of our national debt is held by foreigners. It was 13% in 1988, by the way. China holds $682 billion. Japan holds $577 billion. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, 20% is held by foreigners. No wonder they were worried about the United States backing up the credit of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. I would be too. And no wonder the United States stepped in the conservatorship to make certain that those debts were good so those markets would stay open so we could continue to borrow money to have mortgages. 20% of our corporate debt, as I mentioned before, is held by foreigners. Currently, this is even more fascinating, 50% of every additional dollar of debt that we borrow as a country comes from foreigners. That's actually about 46%, but I rounded it up. So we're very much dependent upon the ability of ourselves to deal with foreigners with regards to raising the funds necessary. So if we have $5 trillion, well, where's it going to come from based upon current amounts that are out there today and assuming folks are willing to work with us? Well, right now you can see what we have in the way of debt. 577 Japan, 682 in China. China holds about 22% of the total amount that's out there, foreigners that they hold. And my goodness, United Kingdom. I wonder if it's United Kingdom or the finance houses of London. It's the finance houses of London that own that. And there's our oil dollars right down there. And the next time you buy a car that gets 12 miles per gallon, you can just kind of add to that. And so we have our $5 trillion U.S. deficit for the next 5 years. How much are we talking about that has to be placed with these other countries? Folks, it's just about a double. That's a huge sum of money that we're counting on other folks to finance where we are. And we need to make certain we're aware of that. And is that what we want? Is that how we want to run our country? Well, probably it's not a bad idea as long as you understand that they have their interests too. Their economies are in a recession. Their economies are slowing. They have their priorities. Right now, China has probably got one of the most polluted places in the world called the Yangtze River. It's a huge issue. Environmental issues in China are such that at some point in time they're going to have to start using their resources not just to build their economy and infrastructure, they're going to have to start thinking about the possibility of how do we make certain we clean up our own environment. Building new economies for tomorrow. If you go to OPEC, which I did in Vienna in 2004, if you ask them what they're doing with their OPEC dollars, they're saying we're trying to take those dollars to rebuild our economy so they're not dependent upon oil. Well, if they're going to rebuild their economies, are they going to loan money to us? Is there going to be some competition for that money? And we have alternative investments available, like I just mentioned. But there's one thing that we know that we can work with, and thank goodness that we have a State Department that works and works effectively. What's mutually beneficial? That's what will prevail. Is it mutually beneficial to them to continue loaning to us? You better believe it is. You know, look at the label on your shirt. Made in China. You better believe it's beneficial to them to have us continue trading with them, and they're going to continue loaning us money to help us in our economy. But there is a concern about the devaluing of the U.S. dollar. It's our forecast that the U.S. dollar will devalue between 20 and 30% in the next 5 years. Now explain to me why I would loan you a dollar to get back 70 cents. Well, unless there has to be something really overwhelming to have me do that. And maybe the trade and the products I buy from you or you buy from me would have me do it. Well, when you take a look at the economic future, we are, whether we want to think so or not, we are dependent upon international financial cooperation. We are not an island that all of a sudden that can decide that made in the USA is the only way we can do things. We are a company that's within the international environment and dependent upon the international environment. And we're going to be subject to tough questions. Now, I happen to be on the loan committee at our bank, and it's nothing for me to sit there and say, well, how are you going to pay me back? I wonder if maybe some of the countries are going to say, how are you going to pay me back? And I think we got good answers for that so far. You know what? Lena, I told you I'd mess up. Let me go back. And the second question becomes, if you're going to pay me back, which I think we can, how are you spending that money? And do we agree that we ought to be loaning you money versus reinvesting that money in our own economy? How are you guys building your economy so that we know it's going to be sustainable? What's the appropriate level of debt and deficit for your country relative to the GDP? Remember I said the EU said 3% is appropriate for a level of debt and no more? Will we start having those kind of standards placed on us? Well, my point to you is a very simple point with regards to all of this, is that we are no longer an isolated economy. We're one that's dependent upon the international environment. And we have to be positioned and ready to have the questions that I just raised and more. And foreigners need confidence that we have a handle on our economic future. So to go back to a point that I would like to bring up with regards to our economic future, or something that you have at your table, I think you all have a chart at your table that resembles what I just gave to you. The line at the bottom is 1.5% GDP growth. Anybody want to tell me what group of countries have that kind of growth rate? That's right, the European Common Market, Europe. So if we want a European model, folks, that's what we have available for us. And as you can see, and look at the chart that you have, the economy would grow at 1.5% to about $25.8 trillion by 2050. Now the U.S. model has been a 3% growth rate. And if you take every year of difference in growth between 3% and 1.5, you'll see by 2030, and I'm guessing that you young people down here, 2030, you'll all be out of college and you'll have your family started and maybe your first home bought, right? And that means a difference of around $72 trillion for these folks. Now, if you take my grandchildren, and when they're out there, we're talking about $354 trillion of difference of economic growth if we can grow our economy at 3% versus 1.5. So, my challenge to you, and my challenge to anybody that cares to hear me talk about it, is I don't care if we have universal health care. I don't care if we have more stimulus packages. I don't care if we end up having more programs that have the government take care of it. What I care about is how do we have 3% GDP growth so that the wealth of this country and the opportunities that we've had and we've experienced can continue in the future. And that's my challenge to all of us. Let's take a look at what it is we have and how we're spending our dollars. Are we spending it wisely so that we can maintain the kind of growth to allow this country to be a significant contributor worldwide, and I think carry out what we hope to think are some of the finest values that this world has ever seen. Thank you very much for your time.